So I'm Christopher Mohammed, PLM at Ruckus, and I'm really excited to be talking about you guys with some features, integrations, and solutions from our products like CloudPath that is used for secure onboarding and Radius, working within this Ruckus Cloud. But let's start with the kind of a new concept that Sorb talked about, which is personas. Now, historically, as Sorb said, people have used RBAC with user groups and device profiles. And that's come with some challenges, especially when you're trying to define a policy that maybe works uniformly. But to introduce a new concept here, we're calling this persona and persona management. Now, if you were probably to spin around at the marketing in the room, they're probably groaning and or maybe falling over on their chair a little bit. But the naming is subject to change, but the concept is here. So we have the idea of persona groups, and persona groups are really representing a logical grouping of users and devices. And this gives us the ability to mix, devices and users. And don't worry, we have an example, and we're going to use Jim, and we're going to abuse Jim a little bit as well in this presentation. And Ruckus Cloud has a way of managing these end users and devices and tying those devices to those users. And we're leveraging this concept to create, a very compelling story of management of those things. For example, if you're at a campus, you have faculty, students, IoT devices, HVACs, printers, whatever those things are. And those can be represented as persona groups. And for example, we could have a student persona group. And then within that persona group, you would have a list of resources that are available for that group, such as certificate templates for PKIs, DPSK pools, policies. And then you would have the individual personas of that group. So if the persona group was, say, students, a persona that belongs to that group would be the student themselves. And then that persona would have any of those attributes associated to them. So if that student had, say, a VLAN, a VNI, filter ID, any restrictions would be associated with that persona. And then within the persona, you would have all your devices that are connected to it. So if, for example, you're a student, your device would be owned by you by a mobile phone or maybe a laptop. And then as that device connects to the network, it will just inherit the attributes from that persona. So let's expand on this concept with an example. So we'll pick on Jim as we usually do, and we have a campus, perhaps a residence, and Jim is staying in room 404. And we've created a persona group for all students that are staying on campus. And perhaps we're using network segmentation, and each student will have their own personal area network for their devices while they're in residence. We then create Jim as a persona, and there's a lot of Wi-Fi chips and Oreos that went into creating Jim, but we did it. And as a persona, we assign Jim maybe a role, a room, a pre-shared key, and a VNI number. Now that Jim is set up, his attributes are available. When Jim utilizes his device, whether it is on Wi-Fi or it's using something like a dynamic pre-shared key or certificate, since those devices belong to him as a persona, they inherit all those settings. So as VNIs, VLANs, user groups, filter IDs, whatever policies were set up are also applied. As Jim uses all his Wi-Fi devices using a DPSK or other mechanisms, or even if he's just plugging his device into a network in his room, those attributes will be provided to him. So we kind of introduced that concept of personas. We're going to jump into a demo here. Now, I'm giving you a sneak peek, and I'm going to do this before the lawyers show up. But we'll show you how this is applied. So this is a recording. Last time we showed you some exciting portals that we're using that made very usable and purpose-driven around MDUs. We have now integrated these solutions into our cloud for ease of deployment of those networks. So I'm going to dive into how these are going to be easier, and I've already opened up personas and persona management. And in here, we've got the persona groups that are available. I've got IoT devices, IP phones, students, and any of the pools or registration lists or network segmentation groups that we're using, the number of personas that also available, they're all available in this list. And you can create as many persona groups as you want and use them as required. If you were able to open up one of the persona groups, which we'll do in a moment, you can go ahead and see Jim and all his devices that are connected, and then as well as any attributes that are also associated to him in this persona. So I'm going to jump into our properties and residence portals here. And within the residence portals, it's all integrated. Previously, I showed you our residence portals before with Captive Portals. We've now integrated it into our cloud service. And I've opened up the venue, looked at property units. Within here, you have all your users that are loaded. VLANs that associate them. You can add users from here. You can add users using our APIs. You can import them from files. You can go ahead and you can suspend users if you wanted to. So if you have Daryl and John that are maybe doing something malicious and they have to leave the campus, we can go ahead and delete these users or even suspend them if they're on a suspension. But let's go ahead and open up one of the portals here. We'll go ahead and we'll view Jim's portal. So Jim would have already gotten the access through SMS or email. I'm just doing it through GUI. But right from here, we can see that you can see the devices that have joined the network, the pre-shared key that we're using, or that was given to Jim, as well as a QR code. So that Jim needs to onboard his iPod. He can go ahead and just scan that, get it online. Now, we have included adaptive policies as well in our cloud service, which allows us to create multiple policies that can be applied to a persona group authentication method. For example, we could have Jim that is authenticating in residence with his own private network. But for the campus experience, perhaps students are to be placed in a general student VLAN, or if they're visiting a campus, a satellite campus where maybe doesn't have those VLANs available, put them in a different VLAN. Here you can create a policy that returns Jim's personal area network in the residence, but once he's on campus, we can return the student VLAN. And this can be applied to, again, persona groups such as printers, IoT devices, and really provide a bunch of different experiences for those users and those devices.